I was at the hospital taking care of my husband after he'd broken both of his legs. While he was sleeping, the head nurse secretly slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. "Stop coming. Check last night's security camera, 3 in the morning." Mercy Hospital, right in the heart of Chicago, was unnervingly quiet. The whole white building felt like a giant beast, fast asleep. Only the faint green lights in the hallway and the cold, flickering glow of the exit sign cast a chilling light on the walls. The smell of antiseptic bandages and old bed linens mingled with that lingering scent of sickness. It was the kind of hospital smell that, if you breathed it in for too long, made your head heavy and your lungs tight. I sat hunched on a folding chair next to the hospital bed. My back was half propped against the wall and half suspended in midair. My spine ached as if someone were twisting it by hand, a dull throb that made me tremble. But I didn't dare move too much. The slightest creak from the chair would make the man on the bed frown and groan. That man was my husband, Terence Van Cleve. He lay perfectly still, both legs encased in thick white casts and suspended in a traction frame, a tangled mess of ropes and pulleys. He looked like a specimen fate had put on display. Terence let out a soft moan, his voice weak and broken. Beads of sweat dotted his forehead, and his eyebrows were knitted together in a single dark line. I shot up instantly, my own legs so numb they felt like they didn't belong to me. I poured a glass of warm water, stuck a straw in it, and held it to his lips, whispering, "Terence, drink some water. It'll help with the dryness. Just sip slowly." He struggled to open his eyes. The same eyes that once melted my heart with their kindness were now bloodshot, looking at me with a mixture of guilt and weakness. "Maya, this is too hard on you," he rasped. "I was so careless on the road, and now you have to take time off work to care for me. I feel so useless." I managed a faint smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Don't be silly. We're husband and wife. The stronger one helps the weaker one. You're laid up now, so I'll take care of you. If it were me, you'd do the same. This is our life, not someone else's. There's nothing to be ashamed of." I used a tissue to wipe a few drops of water from the corner of his mouth, but my heart felt a deep, sharp pang. 3 days ago, Terence had a car accident on his way home. The Chicago police report concluded it was due to brake failure. His car had slammed into a concrete median. He was lucky to be alive, but the doctor, after looking at the x-rays, had sighed and told me, "Severe fractures with nerve compression. You need to prepare yourselves. There's a chance he might be in a wheelchair for a long time." For a man whose career was just starting to stabilize, those words were a death sentence. And for me, Maya, a 30-year-old forensic accountant, it felt as if someone had just demolished the house I had spent nearly 10 years building, brick by brick. Our careers, our home, our plans to have children, all the dreams we had sketched out together were put on an indefinite pause in a single night. For 3 days, I had barely slept. During the day, I sat in that chair by his bed, monitoring his IV drip and medication while juggling emails and reports from my firm on my laptop. At night, I would wake up every 2 hours to help him shift his position, give him a sponge bath, and change his bedpan, making sure the casts stayed dry. Every nerve in my body was stretched as tight as a violin string, ready to snap at the slightest touch. "Where's Jasmine?" Terence asked after a few sips, his eyes scanning the room. He tried to sound casual, but his gaze swept quickly around before landing on the empty chair on the other side of the bed. "She went home to make you some bone broth. She said she'll bring it tomorrow to help you get your strength back. I had to practically force her to go home and get some sleep," I replied, while adjusting the flow of his IV. Jasmine was Terence's younger cousin. She had just graduated from college and moved to the city from a small town in Georgia to find work, staying with us until she could find her own place. She was sweet-talking and quick on her feet. For the past 3 days, she had been a lifesaver, running errands, handling paperwork, and buying meals. Without her help, I probably would have collapsed. Thinking about it, I felt genuinely grateful. "Don't let her work too hard. And you need to get some rest, too. You look paler than the patient," Terence sighed, closing his eyes, his voice tinged with pity. I was about to tease him to lighten the mood when the door creaked open. The soft sound of wheels rolling on the tile floor followed. The woman who entered was the head nurse, Hattie Gable. She was in her late 40s, not beautiful, with a face that was always impassive, the kind of person who had seen so much life and death that nothing surprised her anymore. She spoke little and worked efficiently, normally keeping a professional distance from patients' families. But for some reason, these past few days, she would always give me an extra glance as she passed by. It wasn't a look of annoyance, but more like she was thinking something over and then deciding against it. "Bed 7. Time for your medication," Nurse Gable said, pushing her cart toward Terrence's bed, her voice low so as not to disturb the other patient in the room. I quickly stood up and moved aside. "Thank you, Nurse Gable. You work so hard." She didn't reply. She put on her gloves and gently lifted the blanket to check his casts and the urinary catheter. Her movements were skilled, but her eyes were as sharp as a scalpel, darting from Terrence's face down to his legs before settling on the IV bag. "Ma'am, could you go to the nurse's station and grab 2 more bags of saline for me? This one is almost empty and I'm out of singles on my cart." She turned to me unexpectedly, her tone leaving no room for argument. I was a little taken aback. Tasks like this were usually handled by nursing assistants, but her serious expression kept me from asking questions. I nodded and turned to walk out the door. Just as I passed her, I felt something small and cool pressed into my hand. A small folded piece of paper was slipped into my palm with incredible speed. The sharp, cold sensation startled me like being pricked by a needle. I almost cried out, but when I looked up, Nurse Gable had her back to me, pretending to adjust Terrence's pillow. With her other hand hidden behind her back, she made a swift gesture, bringing her index finger to her lips in a clear signal for silence. My heart seized. The instincts of someone who spends her days working with numbers and spotting irregularities told me immediately that something was wrong. I didn't turn back or stop. My hand clenched around the piece of paper as I walked straight out into the hallway. The corridor was deserted, the only sound the low hum of the air conditioner. I walked straight to the corner that led to the small kitchenette, a blind spot the nurses jokingly called the camera-free zone. The light there was a dim yellow, just bright enough to see a person's face. I pressed my back against the wall, taking a deep breath to steady my trembling hands. The paper was crumpled and damp with my sweat. I slowly unfolded it, my mind still hoping it was just a prescription note or some minor instruction. But the scribbled words that appeared under the dim light sent a chill down my spine. "Stop coming! Check last night's security camera. He's faking sleep." Just those few words, written in a hurried scrawl with smeared ink. But to me, it felt like someone had just dumped a bucket of ice water over my head. My scalp tingled and my palms went cold. The words "faking sleep" danced before my eyes. Stop coming. Who was faking sleep? Terrence? Check last night's camera. What happened last night? Imagine being in that situation. Your husband, the man you love, has been in an accident and might be disabled, and you've dropped everything to care for him. Then, in the middle of the night, a woman as famously stoic as Hattie Gable secretly hands you a note like that. Anyone who says they wouldn't be terrified must be made of stone. My head spun. The past 3 days flashed before my eyes like a fast-forwarded tape. Terrence was always complaining of pain, especially whenever I got close to his casted legs. He wouldn't let me look at the injuries, saying, "It's gruesome, Maya. Don't look." His phone, which he never used to lock, was now tucked tightly under his pillow every night. The moment a text came in, he would quickly silence it. And Jasmine, it seemed that every time she entered the room, he would moan more, appearing weaker. But when it was just the two of us, I sometimes felt he was in less pain, though he would try to hide it by closing his eyes and holding his breath. I had dismissed those details before, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But now, under the dim yellow light, with those words on that piece of paper, all those scattered grains of sand were suddenly strung together into a long, tight chain, squeezing the air from my throat. I stood frozen in the kitchenette for a few more minutes until the pain of my nails digging into my palms brought me back to reality. Don't panic. I wasn't just a wife. I was a forensic accountant. For years, my training had taught me one thing. When you find an anomaly, you find the evidence. You don't jump to conclusions. With that thought, I tore the note into tiny pieces, dropped them into the toilet, and flushed until nothing was left. Then I bent down and splashed cold water on my face. Looking up into the mirror, I saw a woman with a pale face and eyes sunken from lack of sleep. But something in her gaze had changed. The familiar softness was replaced by a very thin, cold glint. "Get it together, Maya," I whispered to myself, crying, screaming, fighting. None of that will solve anything right now. You need the truth. I turned off the faucet, grabbed 2 bags of saline from the shelf as I was told, and walked back to the room. As I entered, I forced my expression to remain calm. "Nurse Gable, I've got the saline." Nurse Gable looked up at me. In her eyes, I saw 2 things clearly: pity and determination. She took the bags, hung a new one, and checked the IV line one last time. Then she said, as if talking to herself, "He should be stable tonight. You should try to get some rest. We'll call you if anything happens." I nodded my thanks, but didn't sit down right away. I stood there for a long time, watching Terrence. He was lying still again, eyes closed, breathing evenly. To an outsider, he was just a pitiful husband suffering from broken legs with his devoted, exhausted wife standing by his side. But in my mind, after that note, Terrence's face had become strangely unfamiliar, like a masterfully painted mask. "Tonight, I'll let you sleep. Tomorrow, we'll see what's real," I thought silently, not sure if I was talking to him or to myself. That night, for the first time in 3 days, I didn't stay awake by his bedside, counting his every groan. I lay down on the folding chair, pulled the blanket up, and stared at the ceiling with my eyes wide open. A single thought repeated over and over in my head. Tomorrow, I have to see that hospital footage, no matter what. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the window, I got up to draw the blinds and adjust Terrence's blanket. My body felt weak, as if I had just recovered from a long fever. But my mind was strangely alert. The moment I opened my eyes, Nurse Gable's words on the note reappeared, as clear as day. Terrence was still lying quietly, his eyes closed and lips dry, occasionally wincing as if in pain. Jasmine brought in a container of soup and set it on the small table. Seeing me awake, she chirped, "Maya, you're up. I just made some bone broth for Terrence to help him get his strength back. You must not have slept well last night. Look at those dark circles." I glanced quickly at Terrence. His eyes were still closed, but his shoulders trembled slightly, as if he were trying to suppress a groan. To an outsider, it looked like a family united in overcoming a tragedy. If this had been yesterday, I would have smiled and thanked Jasmine, my heart warmed by my considerate cousin-in-law. But this morning, everything I saw was distorted, like looking into a cracked mirror where every reflection shattered into sharp, jagged pieces. I smoothed my hair back, keeping my voice even. "Thanks, Jasmine. I have to stop by the office for a bit. They need me to sign some urgent documents. Can you stay here and keep an eye on Terrence for me? Call me if anything happens." Hearing this, Terrence slowly opened his eyes and looked at me with concern. "Maya, will you be long? I feel anxious being here alone. You've been taking care of everything these past few days, leaving me with a kid." "What are you talking about? Jasmine has been a huge help to us. We haven't even thanked her properly yet." I turned and smiled at Jasmine, then patted Terrence's hand reassuringly. "I'll only be a few hours. Just take it easy. If you need anything, call a nurse." After I spoke, I bent down to adjust the traction ropes and the bandages on his back. My movements were as careful as always, but inside there was a cold, empty void. Before, every time I touched Terrence, I would think, "This is my husband, the man I chose to spend my life with." But now, a different question kept swirling in my head. Is he really acting? I quickly gathered my coat, handbag, and laptop. Jasmine took the bag from me, not forgetting to add, Drive safe, Maya. Come back for lunch. We can have takeout. Don't eat out too much. All that greasy food is bad for you. I nodded and looked back at Terrence one last time. He grabbed my hand, his eyes bloodshot, the perfect picture of a man terrified of being abandoned. Maya, I'm so sorry. What if I end up disabled? If it gets too hard for you, please don't leave me. Don't divorce me, okay? You're the only reason I'm still alive. If this were yesterday, I probably would have cried. I would have rushed to assure him, I will never leave you. But now, all I felt was a lump in my throat. I gently pulled my hand away and forced a smile. What are you thinking? I'm just stepping out for a bit. I'll be back. Lie still, and don't move around too much, or it will hurt more. Jasmine is here, and the nurses are here. No one is abandoning you. I turned and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind me, a soft sound, but to my ears, it was the sound of a life splitting in two. Instead of heading for the main exit, I went down to the parking garage. It was a vast, dimly lit space that smelled of gasoline and damp concrete. I found a secluded spot, parked close to the wall, rolled up the windows, and locked the doors. Only in that sealed space did I allow myself to exhale a long, slow breath. I took out my phone and found the contact for Marcus Quincy, a guy who was a few years behind me in college and now worked in cybersecurity for a major software company. I sent him a text. Marcus, I need your help with something personal. It's urgent and has to be completely confidential. I'll pay you well. The read receipt appeared almost instantly, typical for a guy who lived glued to a screen. What's up, Maya? Just tell me what you need. A round of drinks is on you next time. I bit my lip and typed, I need to see the internal security footage from Mercy Hospital Orthopedic Ward, room 307, from around 1 in the morning to 3 in the morning last night. Is there any way you can get access? As soon as I sent the message, my heart started pounding. I knew I was doing something that wasn't exactly by the book, but I also knew that if I didn't, I might spend the rest of my life living in a terrifying state of uncertainty. A moment later, Marcus called me directly. Maya, this is a big one. It's a public hospital and their system isn't a joke, but it's not impossible. Give me the exact hospital name, location, and a picture of the room door. I'll see if I can track the internal IP. But Maya, I have to ask, are you sure you want to see this? Some things, once you see them, you can't unsee. I paused for a moment. Marcus's voice made me feel like a client hiring a private investigator, but there was no turning back. I said softly, I'd rather be hurt once than live with this doubt for the rest of my life. I'll send you the picture now. Please try to get it for me this morning. Afternoon will be too late. Okay, stay near the hospital somewhere with a decent Wi-Fi signal. I'll let you know how it goes. If I get a link, I'll send it so you can stream it directly. Don't download anything. It could be traced. I hung up, my hand trembling slightly as I opened my camera roll and found the picture of the orthopedic wardroom 307 sign I had sneakily taken on my way down to the garage. After sending it, I turned my laptop on, tethered it to my phone's hotspot, and sat curled up in the driver's seat, listening to the hum of the car's AC. Time crawled by. Every minute felt like an hour. While I waited, my mind automatically started replaying old memories. I remembered when we first started dating. Terrence was so hardworking. He would ride his motorcycle all the way from Oak Park to Bronzeville just to bring me a container of homemade soup because he heard I was stuck working late at my first job. Back then, I believed there were still plenty of sincere men in the world. After we got married, he started a small construction supply company. He used to boast to his friends, "My wife is a forensic accountant. She's tough. If I do anything crooked, she'll sniff it out immediately." He would laugh, ruffle my hair, and say, "Don't worry, you handle the finances. I'm just out here trying to make a name for us." Those words felt so warm back then. In recent years, his business had become less stable, and less money was coming in. I noticed he was more irritable, often coming home late, smelling of beer and a strange kind of cigarette smoke. But every time I asked, he'd say, "A man has to network. It's tough to land projects these days. Don't make it harder for me." I was so busy, sometimes too exhausted to even breathe. So I let it go. Partly because I trusted him, and partly because I thought a marriage couldn't survive if a wife was always suspicious. It wasn't until today, sitting in this hospital parking garage clutching my laptop like a life raft, that I realized all this time I had been busy auditing blueprints and cost estimates, but I had forgotten to audit the man sleeping right next to me. An hour passed, then another. My eyes started to sting, and my neck grew stiff from sitting in one position for so long. Just when I thought Marcus had given up, my phone buzzed repeatedly. A message popped up. "Maya, I'm sending you a link. It will only be active for 30 minutes, then it will expire. When you watch, turn off all external sound and use headphones. Whatever you see, stay calm. Don't do anything rash. I'm serious." I took a deep breath, plugged my headphones into the laptop, opened a browser, and clicked the link. The screen showed a black window, which a few seconds later resolved into an image. It was a top-down view from a ceiling-mounted camera, black and white, but clear enough. The angle covered most of the room. Terrence's bed, the folding chair I always sat in, the door, the small table. The timestamp in the corner read, "Room 307, 1:58 a.m." I dragged the timeline to around 2 in the morning, the time I remembered finally giving in to Terrence's pleas to go home, shower, and come back early in the morning. The image was clear. A woman with her hair in a high ponytail, wearing a light jacket, it was me, was bustling around, tidying things up, then leaning down to say something to Terrence before opening the door and leaving. The door closed, and the room in the video fell silent. Terrence lay motionless like a dead fish. I clenched my fists, my fingers trembling slightly on the trackpad. A tiny sliver of hope remained. Maybe Nurse Gable had misunderstood. Maybe he just moved a little, not enough to be called faking sleep. But less than a minute later, the thing I dreaded most appeared, stark and undeniable. Terrence's eyes snapped open. They were quick, alert, with none of the groggy, pained look he always had around me. He lifted his head, scanned the room, and then propped himself up on his elbows. The movement was sharp and steady, nothing like that of a man with severe fractures who was supposed to be immobilized. I could clearly see his legs, still in their casts, lifting up and down, rotating side to side. He even stretched to grab the phone he always hid under his pillow, tapping on it with a look of such casual ease it was hard to believe. A soft thud echoed in the car. It was the sound of the pen dropping from my hand onto the floor. I bit my lips so hard I could taste blood, but I didn't tear my eyes away from the screen. A few minutes later, the door in the video opened, and Jasmine walked in carrying a large bag, probably food. The camera didn't capture smells, but I could almost imagine the scent of fried chicken and warm beer wafting through the screen. As soon as she walked in, Jasmine grinned. "Brought you the good stuff. Is Maya gone?" Terrence, no longer moaning, chuckled, his voice clear. "Yeah, she just left. God, I was starving. It's been 3 days of soup and half bowls of whatever bland stuff Maya brought." "Hand it over." He snatched the bag, and inside was a box of fried chicken and a few cans of beer. His hands moved nimbly, tearing off a piece of chicken and biting into it with gusto. A stark contrast to the man who claimed he could barely swallow when I was there. Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, leaning in to pat his leg through the cast, giggling. "Eat slowly, you'll choke. I was so worried about you, but you have to keep playing the part of the suffering patient. If Maya gets suspicious, the whole thing is ruined." Terrence, still chewing, patted her back and then gave her a light slap on the behind, seemingly oblivious to the camera. "You're a great actress, Jasmine. Without you helping me, she'd never have bought it. Looks like she's softening up. A few more days and she'll agree to sell the Bronzeville brownstone. Once that's sold, we pay off the debts and we'll still have over $1 million left. Plenty to start over somewhere else." The words Bronzeville brownstone exploded in my head. It was the 3-story house my parents had left me. The deed was in my name. When we got married, I had agreed to let Terrence live there, but I had always considered it my inheritance, my final safety net if life ever got rough. But in my husband's plan, it was just a life raft for him, a piece of bait to keep his demons at bay. Jasmine couldn't hide her excitement. "Are you sure Maya will sell? She seems gentle, but she can be stubborn." "That's why she's easy to fool," Terrence scoffed, twisting the cap off a beer and taking a long swig. "I had my doctor friend talk to her, scare her with all the worst-case scenarios. Then I'll act all hopeless, tell her I'm afraid of being a burden. Maya will always choose to sacrifice. She has a big heart for everyone but herself. You just wait. Once the house is sold, I'll give you half. We can go to Miami or San Diego, open a bar or something. We can live well. No need to stay here and look at her face all day." I saw Jasmine lean her head on his shoulder, her voice dropping. "What about the loan sharks? I heard you owe them a lot." "Yeah, well, a debt is a debt. Once we have the money, we can pay it off." He shrugged. "I owe them about $200,000. The interest is piling up, but that house will solve everything. Don't you worry. The important thing is that Maya has to sign the papers." Jasmine was quiet for a few seconds, then asked hesitantly, "So, when will you divorce her?" I saw Terrence frown, slightly annoyed at the question, but he quickly forced a reassuring smile. "After everything is settled. If I divorce her now, she'll get suspicious and it'll ruin everything. Don't worry, it's over between us. I mean, what woman could stand a disabled, debt-ridden husband? She'll leave me eventually. Then I'll be the one who was abandoned, the victim. I'll have the money, and I'll have you. Smart, right?" I couldn't listen anymore. My headphones were still on, but my lips were salty from biting them. I pulled the headphones off, and the sound of my own breathing filled the silent car like it belonged to someone else. Outside in the parking garage, a few people in white coats walked by silently, their soft-soled shoes making almost no sound. No one knew that inside a small car right under the hospital, a wife had just witnessed her husband's entire betrayal. I didn't cry. My eyes were strangely dry, as if my tears were too scared of this truth to show themselves. The first thing I felt wasn't grief, but humiliation. Humiliated for being so underestimated. Humiliated for priding myself on being sharp, on being able to account for every dollar in a multi-million-dollar project, only to let the man I shared my bed with turn me into such an easy mark. I thought of the Bronzeville brownstone, of the afternoons my dad would sit on the front steps in his old t-shirt, sipping iced tea, watching me come home from school, his eyes always smiling. I thought of my mom, how every Thanksgiving she'd make a huge pot roast, telling me to always cherish the house. "If anything ever happens to us," she'd say, "this house is your anchor. It's your roots." Those roots, in Terrence's eyes, were just collateral for loan sharks. I suddenly burst out laughing, a dry, hollow sound that echoed in the car like a stranger's voice. Anyone passing by would have thought I was having a breakdown, but that laugh was like flipping a switch. In an instant, my mind shifted from panic to ice-cold clarity. I opened my phone and texted Marcus, "Save that clip for me, from the moment I left the room until Jasmine came in and they talked. Get as much of their conversation as you can. I'll save a copy myself, thank you. I owe you big time for this." Marcus replied immediately, "I've already downloaded it, trimmed it, and I'm sending it to you through a secure channel. Keep it safe. Don't let anyone touch it. Do you need me to call someone?" I stared at the words, my lips pressed into a thin line. "No, I'm okay. This is my mess. I'll handle it. Please don't tell anyone. Act like this never happened." After sending the text, I sat up straight and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. It reflected a woman with disheveled hair and sunken eyes, but her gaze was no longer trembling. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity, from this second on, the gentle, patient Maya of the past was dead. What was left was Maya the accountant, the woman of numbers, of balance sheets, of cold, hard audits. The only difference was that this time, the project I needed to audit wasn't a building, but a marriage. I sat in the car for a long time after turning off the video. Not because I was still scared, but because I was methodically organizing everything in my head. The images I had just seen no longer terrified me. They were just data, clear, irrefutable evidence. And when things became data, I knew how to handle them. I wiped my face, adjusted my coat, and started the car. Instead of going back to the hospital room as I had promised Terrence, I turned the car out of the hospital gates and drove straight home. The familiar streets suddenly felt alien. The tree-lined avenues, the coffee shop where Terrence and I used to sit, the bakery I frequented to buy his favorite pastries, they all receded in the rearview mirror like scenes from an old movie. I was fast-forwarding through to skip the painful parts. When I got home, the house was silent, devoid of human warmth. Jasmine's shoes were still scattered by the door. Terrence's jacket hung on the rack, and the scent of his cologne lingered in the air. I stood in the middle of the living room for a moment before slowly locking the door. The soft click of the deadbolt sounded in my heart like a boundary being sealed. The first thing I did was open the safe in our bedroom. Inside were the deed to the Bronzeville brownstone, my personal savings bonds, and a few important documents my parents had left me. I took everything out and put it into a large tote bag. Then I opened my laptop and logged into my personal bank account. The password was one Terrence used to know. I changed everything. Passwords to my bank accounts, my email, my investment portfolios, one by one, slowly, methodically, with a coldness that surprised even myself. While I was doing this, my phone rang. Terrence's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering, forcing my voice to sound soft. "I just got home to grab some more things for you. I'll be back soon." "Maya, you've been gone so long. I was worried." Terrence's voice came through, weak and pathetic, just like always. "Jasmine said you hadn't come back yet." I gave a small laugh. "The house was a mess, so I'm tidying up a bit. You just lie still and don't move around. Endure the pain a little longer. I'll be back soon." "Okay, try to come back early. I feel so empty here without you," he sighed. After hanging up, I allowed myself a small, bitter smirk. If it weren't for that video, I would probably be rushing back right now, worried about his pain, afraid that Jasmine was being clumsy. But now, every word he spoke sounded like a line from a script. I picked up another phone and called Marcus. "Marcus, I need you to do one more thing for me. Find out everything you can about Terrence's debts, gambling, loans over the past year, any companies or individuals, any accounts in his name. See what you can find." Marcus was silent for 2 seconds, then said, "Okay, but this will require digging through multiple sources. I suspect he's into some serious loan shark business. A few strange IPs were asking about someone with his name a while back. I'll work on it quickly for you." I hung up and sank onto a chair, leaning my back against the wall. The exhaustion finally hit me, but instead of feeling weak, I felt a small, hot flame burning inside me. It wasn't a raging fire, but a slow, steady heat that would last a very long time. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital. As I walked into the room, I saw Terrence with his eyes closed, his face contorted, as if he had just had a spasm of pain. Jasmine, standing beside him, greeted me. "You're back. I just gave Terrence his pain medication, so he's feeling a little better now." "Okay, let me check on him," I said, walking over and placing my hand on his forehead. It was warm, but no fever. Terrence opened his eyes and squeezed my hand tightly. "You're back, Maya. I'm in so much pain. I don't know how much longer I can take this." I looked at that face, and for the first time in my life, I felt no sympathy. I found it almost comical. "Try to hang in there. This afternoon, I have to meet with a lawyer about your accident insurance. They need some additional paperwork," I said as casually as I could. Terrence flinched slightly, but covered it up quickly. "A lawyer? Why does it have to be so complicated?" "It's a major insurance company. There's a lot of red tape," I replied curtly. Jasmine, standing nearby, flinched when she heard the word insurance. I noticed it clearly, even though she tried to hide it with a smile. Just then, Andre Van Cleve, Terrence's younger brother, walked in. Andre was 3 years younger than Terrence, a delivery driver by trade, a quiet, honest man. Seeing his brother laid up, Andre was clearly distraught, carrying a large bag of fruit. "Maya, how's Terrence doing? Mom told me he was in a lot of pain." "He's a little more stable now. The doctor said we still need to monitor him," I answered. Andre looked at Terrence, his eyes turning red. "Hang in there, bro. We're all worried about you." Terrence nodded, his voice choked with emotion. "I know." Watching them, I suddenly felt sorry for Andre. He had no idea he was sympathizing with a man putting on a performance, a play staged out of greed. For a moment, my heart softened, but then I remembered Terrence's alert eyes in the video, his hand slapping Jasmine's behind, his words, "Once the house is sold, it's all over." And just like that, any softness in me recoiled like a snail into its shell. In the evening, Nurse Gable came by to check on the room. When she saw me, her gaze lingered a little longer than usual. I knew she was wondering if I had seen it. I waited until Terrence had drifted off from the medication and quietly stepped out into the hallway. Nurse Gable was writing on a chart. I stood beside her and lowered my voice. I saw it. The pen in her hand paused for a beat. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly, her voice low. "So, what are you going to do?" I glanced back toward the room where Terrence was lying, then looked back at her. "I can't say right now, but I need you to help me keep this a secret, at least for now." Nurse Gable nodded without asking any more questions. I knew she was the type of person who only said what was necessary. Her silence at that moment was more valuable to me than 1,000 words of advice. That night, while Jasmine was out buying dinner, I sat by the bed pretending to be exhausted and rested my head on the mattress. Terrence thought I was asleep and let out a soft sigh, but I was wide awake, listening to his every breath, just waiting. I opened my phone and texted Marcus. "Anything yet?" The reply came quickly. "I have a preliminary report. He has loans from at least 4 different unofficial lenders. The principal is close to $200,000 with exorbitant interest rates. Some are under his company's name, some personal. He also has a history of online gambling, which later moved offline. His bank transactions show traces of money from several loan shark rings. I have screenshots of everything." I read the text with a strange sense of calm. Everything fit together with terrifying precision. The accident, the faked injury, the house, the insurance, the secret texts with Jasmine, it all came together to form a complete picture. I replied to Marcus with one sentence. "Thank you. Keep it safe. I'll need it." Later that night, Terrence called his mother. I overheard her voice on the other end of the line, crying and complaining, blaming me for not taking good care of her son, then tactfully bringing up selling the house to save his life. Terrence moaned, his voice sounding like it was about to give out. "I've talked to Maya, Mom. I think she's considering it. Don't push her too much. She's stressed with work. She probably needs time." I sat not far away, hearing every word, my heart so numb it surprised me. A whole family from top to bottom was colluding to pressure me into willingly offering up the house my parents left me. If I hadn't seen that video, I probably would have collapsed in tears, consumed by guilt. The next morning, my mother-in-law, Miss Gladys, came to the hospital. She was thin and haggard. The moment she walked in, she burst into tears. "Oh, my son, why is your life so hard? If anything happens to you, how will I go on?" Terrence took her hand, his voice weak. I stood to the side respectfully. "Hello, Miss Gladys." She turned to me, her eyes a mix of pleading and reproach. "Maya, I know this is hard on you, but right now the only way is to sell the house to take care of Terrence. Don't be so stubborn. If he dies, what's the point of holding on to property?" I looked at her for a long time. This woman was, by title, my mother-in-law, the person who had taken my hand on my wedding day and told me to think of her as my own mother. But now, in her eyes, all I saw was the fear of losing her son and a vague, calculating look about money. I took a deep breath. "I understand, Miss Gladys. I'm thinking about it, but selling a house is a big decision. I need to review all the paperwork and check Terrence's insurance policy to avoid any complications later. Please just give me a little more time. Miss Gladys wanted to say more, but Andre gently pulled her arm. Mom, let Maya take her time. She's been through a lot these past few days. Miss Gladys pursed her lips, but said nothing more. But I knew that from this day on, the pressure would only intensify. They would push me to sell the house quickly. Terrence and Jasmine would act out their parts even more dramatically, and my mother-in-law would be the trump card Terrence used to play on my compassion. That afternoon, when everyone else had gone out to eat, and it was just me and Terrence in the room, he pulled my hand, his voice very soft. Maya, have you thought it through? I'm scared that if we wait too long, it will be too late. I looked deep into his eyes, not avoiding his gaze for the first time. Don't worry. If I sell, I'll sell. But everything has to be clear and transparent. I don't want to lose the money and then be accused of abandoning my husband later. A flicker of relief crossed Terrence's eyes. He thought I was finally giving in. But I thought to myself, oh, I'll sell it, but not in the way you think. After that conversation, Terrence's attitude toward me changed noticeably. He became gentler, held my hand more often, and his eyes were always filled with gratitude. He would even shed a tear or two when talking about his fear of becoming a burden to me. If this had been before, I might have believed it was real. But now, for every tear he shed, the image of him munching on fried chicken, drinking beer, and slapping Jasmine's behind flashed in my mind. I watched him perform, my heart as cold as ice. My mother-in-law started visiting the hospital almost daily. She stopped her harsh accusations and switched to a softer approach. She would hold my hand and whisper, Maya, I know you love Terrence very much, but our family situation isn't what it used to be. Please, just sacrifice a little. Once he's better and his business is back on its feet, you can buy another house. I would just nod non-committally to get her to stop. Andre, on the other hand, was different. Every time he came to visit his brother, he would stand quietly in a corner, watching Terrence for a long time, as if he wanted to say something but held back. Once, as I was walking him out, he pulled me aside and whispered, Maya, Terrence has been acting strange lately. Sometimes I walk in unexpectedly and he's perfectly still, but other times I can hear him on the phone and his voice is completely normal. Maya, be careful. I looked at Andre, my heart stirring. From the outside, it looked like I was being cornered with no one on my side, but it turned out someone else had noticed the inconsistencies. Thank you, Andre, was all I could say. That evening, Jasmine came back very late. When she entered the room, she was wearing a strange perfume. Terrence gave her a quick, sharp look. I noticed everything. Jasmine placed a bowl of soup on the table and said softly, Maya, I have a job interview early tomorrow morning. I probably won't be able to come in and help with Terrence as much for the next few days. I hope you understand. I nodded. Of course, you're young. You have to think about your future. I'm here and the nurses are here. Jasmine kept her head down, avoiding my eyes. She flinched when Terrence's hand subtly squeezed hers for a brief second before letting go. My eyes turned cold. I knew she was scared. Scared I would notice. Scared everything would be exposed. And when people get scared, they make mistakes. That night, when the room was quiet, I secretly checked the messages from Marcus. He had compiled a complete file on all of Terrence's debts, including transfers he had made to accounts linked to gambling. There was even a recording Marcus had bought from someone in the Loan Shark group. Terrence's voice was frantic, promising to get the money by any means necessary within 2 weeks. Listening to it, I closed my eyes. So, that was it. The deadline they were pushing me to sell the house for was actually to save Terrence's own skin from his lenders. I knew I couldn't tip my hand. The moment Terrence knew I had the full story, he might do something desperate. I had to continue playing the part of the devoted wife, willing to sacrifice everything for her husband. The next morning, I proactively told my mother-in-law, I've thought a lot about it. If selling the house can save Terrence, I'll sell it. But I need to work with the bank and a real estate agent to make sure everything is done properly so we get a good price. I don't want to sell it at a loss. Miss Gladys's face lit up. That's wonderful, dear. Thank you. If Terrence knew, he would be so happy. She turned to the bed, holding Terrence's hand and sobbing. Son, your wife has agreed to sell the house. You have to live. I won't let you die. Hearing this, Terrence seemed to gain a new burst of energy, his eyes welling up with tears. Maya, you're my savior. Even if I die, I'll never forget what you've done for me. I smiled and bowed my head. Don't say that. I'm doing this for our family. But in my heart, a cold voice echoed. Yes, for our family, but not the family you're scheming for. That afternoon, I left the hospital early, using the excuse that I had to go home to find some documents. On the way, I went straight to a law office tucked away in a quiet alley. Attorney Sterling was a lawyer I had worked with on a construction contract dispute. He was a few years older than me, calm and discreet. After I told him the whole story, from the accident and the camera footage to the debts, he sat in thoughtful silence for a long time. Legally, he finally said, if we can prove that Terrence staged the accident or falsified his injuries for insurance fraud, the consequences will be severe. But for now, you shouldn't file a complaint yet. Their plan is to have you willingly sell the house. So, let them believe you're doing just that. In the meantime, my firm will help you gather more concrete evidence. I nodded, my hands resting on his desk, trembling slightly. I don't need them to go to jail right away. I just need to protect my parents' property, and I don't want to be accused of abandoning him later. Attorney Sterling looked at me for a moment and said quietly, You're stronger than I thought. I just gave a weak smile. I'm not strong because I don't feel pain. I'm strong because I can't afford to break down right now. That evening, I returned to the hospital. When Terrence saw me arrive late, he was frantic. Where have you been? I called you several times, but you didn't pick up. I was meeting with a real estate agent. They looked at the house today. There's a lot of interest, but we haven't settled on a price yet, I replied calmly. Terrence's eyes lit up. Really? How much did they offer? Around $800,000, I said slowly. But I haven't agreed. I want $900,000. That was lower than the market rate. I intentionally quoted a low price so they wouldn't suspect I was stalling. As expected, Terrence nodded, looking anxious. Yeah, as long as it sells quickly, that's what matters. We can figure out the price later. I looked at him and said nothing more. In my eyes, his sell quickly meant meeting the deadline for his debts, not for any broken leg. That night, Jasmine snuck out again. I pretended not to notice. I needed her to be away from the hospital more often so Terrence would lose one of his secret pillars of support. And just as I predicted, without Jasmine around, Terrence became visibly agitated. His pain started to become inconsistent. Sometimes he would forget his role and sit up a little too straight. I saw it all. 2 days later, my mother-in-law came to rush me about signing the papers to sell the house. I told her the agent required original documents, which would take a few more days. She was clearly displeased, but held her tongue since she was relying on me. Andre, however, grew quieter and quieter. Once, while helping me carry things to my car, he suddenly asked, Maya, if Terrence did something wrong, would you forgive him? I looked straight into his eyes. What do you think? Andre looked down, his voice choked. I just hope if he's done something wrong, he stops in time. His words made my heart sink for a moment, but then I understood. Some mistakes can't be fixed just by stopping. When you've wagered with money, honor, and even lives, there's no turning back. That night, after Terrence fell asleep from his medication, I went out to the hallway and stood by the window, looking down at the dimly lit parking lot. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. The lenders are getting impatient. One of them said, if he doesn't pay on time, they're coming to the hospital to talk. You need to be careful. I think something is going to happen within the week. I gripped my phone tightly. My time was running out. This play. I had to bring the curtain down before those people made their entrance with violence. I went back into the room and looked at Terrence lying peacefully on the bed, his face as innocent as a saint's. I pulled up a chair and sat down, whispering just loud enough for myself to hear. You're a great actor, Terrence, but your leading lady is about to exit the stage." The next morning, I deliberately took the day off work to stay at the hospital, not to care for Terrence, but to wait for the right moment. I felt like someone standing in a dark room, hand on the light switch, just waiting for the perfect instant to flip it and expose everything. Terrence was thrilled to see me staying all day. He acted even more intensely than usual. Whenever someone came in, he would groan in pain and hold my hand, his voice as thin as a thread. "Maya, don't leave me. Please, you're all I have left." Miss Gladys sat beside him, wiping her tears. Andre leaned against the door, watching the scene with a look of deep suspicion. As for me, I just silently played my part as the devoted wife so convincingly that sometimes even I was unnerved by my own endurance. Around noon, Jasmine returned to the hospital. The moment she walked in, her eyes darted around nervously. When she saw me sitting there, she froze for a second. I smiled at her, a perfectly calm smile. "How was the interview?" "Oh, they said they'll call me back for a second round," she stammered. Terrence shot her a look, his eyes betraying a hint of impatience. I understood they were missing their private conversations. I decided to let them feel that void for a little longer. In the afternoon, I called Attorney Sterling. "Attorney Sterling, I've done everything according to the plan. The lenders are starting to make moves. I think they'll show up tonight or tomorrow." His voice was grave. "I've already contacted the police. When you give the signal, they'll come in. Remember to stay calm. Don't let them provoke you." I glanced through the glass into the hospital room where Terrence was giving his mother a weak smile. I replied softly, "I'm calmer than I've ever been." I hung up and put the phone in my bag. The fear was gone. All that was left was a clear sense that it was time to end this. Around 7 in the evening, as visiting hours were winding down and my mother-in-law was preparing to leave, Terrence suddenly grabbed my hand tightly. "Maya, what's the update on selling the house?" I looked straight into his eyes. "Tomorrow afternoon they've scheduled an appointment for me at the title company to put down a deposit. If all goes well, we can sign over the deed in 3 days." Terrence's eyes lit up, and Miss Gladys was overjoyed. "That's great news, dear. Now I can rest easy." Andre stood silently for a moment, then asked quietly, "Maya, are you sure there won't be any problems?" I nodded. "Don't worry, Andre." Around 8, just after the evening nurse had left and the room had quieted down, the door was suddenly shoved open. 3 strange men walked in. They didn't look like family visitors. Their eyes were cold, their shoulders squared with an air of intimidation. The room's atmosphere instantly tensed. The man in the lead scanned the room and then looked directly at Terrence. "Terrence, we're here to visit." Terrence's face paled for a second before he started moaning loudly. Who? Who are you? What are you doing here? I'm seriously injured. My wife is about to sell the house to pay you back." Miss Gladys stood up in alarm. "Who are you people? This is a hospital, not a place for you to cause trouble." One of the men sneered. "We're just here to check on an old friend, ma'am. Don't you worry." Their eyes landed on me. I took a step forward, my voice steady. "If you're looking for Terrence, state your business. I'm his wife." The man raised an eyebrow. "So you're the wife? Even better. Your husband owes us close to $200,000 in principal. The interest isn't small either. He promised he'd have the money in 2 weeks. That deadline is almost up. We just want a clear answer. When do we get paid?" A dead silence fell over the room. Miss Gladys was trembling, turning to look at Terrence. "Terrence, you owe them that much money? Why didn't you tell me?" Terrence stammered, sweat pouring down his face. I just borrowed a little for the business. Maya, tell them we're about to have the money." I looked at Terrence, my voice chillingly calm. "Don't worry, there will be money, but it won't be from selling my house." The entire room froze. The 3 men stared at me, their eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? I took out my phone, pressed a button, and the screen of the wall-mounted TV in the room flickered to life. The security footage from that night appeared. Every frame was crystal clear. Terrence sitting up, checking his phone, eating chicken, drinking beer, Jasmine sitting close to him. Their conversation about selling the house, about the debt, about deceiving me. It echoed through the silent room. Miss Gladys screamed, "Oh my God, what is this, Terrence? What have you done?" Andre stood as if turned to stone. Jasmine, pale as a ghost, shrank back against the wall. And Terrence, he could no longer moan. He shot up in a panic, his broken legs slamming down on the bed. "Maya, listen to me. Let me explain. This is a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed coldly. "A misunderstanding about you faking a broken leg to trick me into selling my house? Or a misunderstanding about you and Jasmine plotting to use my money to pay off your gambling debts?" The three lenders looked at each other. The leader nodded and chuckled softly. "Well, damn. I never thought Terrence had this kind of nerve." I turned to them. "The money he owes you is from his gambling debts. I have nothing to do with it. But I have already spoken with my lawyer and the police. All of this evidence has been sent to them. If you cause any more trouble here, he won't be the only one in a bad spot." The man squinted at me for a long moment, then burst out laughing. "Fine, we won't get involved in your family drama. But Terrence, you still owe us. This is the last chance we're giving you." They turned and left without another word. The hospital room was plunged into a heavy silence. Miss Gladys wailed, beating her fists on Terrence's chest. "You've ruined me, son. What have you done to get into this mess?" Andre stared at Terrence, his eyes filled with heart-wrenching disappointment. You would lie to your wife? Lie to your own mother? All for money?" Jasmine, trembling, sank to her knees. "Maya, I was wrong. Terrence manipulated me. I never thought it would go this far." Terrence looked at me, his eyes for the first time showing his true nature, terrified and desperate. "Maya, I'm begging you, don't leave me. I was wrong. I really was." I looked at him for a long, long time. I wasn't angry anymore, and it didn't hurt like it did at first. All that was left was a deep, profound exhaustion. "You weren't wrong just once. You were wrong the moment you chose to lie. The moment you put my parents' house on the line for your gambling, there was nothing left to save between us." I turned to Miss Gladys, my voice slow and deliberate. "Miss Gladys, I have given everything to this family. But from today, I am no longer your daughter-in-law." Miss Gladys froze, then collapsed onto a chair. I looked at Andre. "I'm sorry I couldn't preserve the good image of your brother for you." Andre was silent, his eyes red. Then I turned my back and walked away. Behind me, there were cries, calls, and moans, but I didn't stop. Terrence's play was over, and from now on, I would write my own life. I left the hospital that night. The wind was cold and sharp. The streetlights cast long, pale yellow streaks on the damp asphalt. For the first time in years, I walked through the city without feeling like I belonged anywhere. Before, no matter where I went, I always had a place to return to, called home. Now, that home had become a wound. I went back to the house my parents left me, the house that had almost been traded for Terrence's dirty bets. The door closed behind me. I leaned against the wall and slid down to the floor, burying my face in my hands. As strong as I had been at the hospital, here I was just as weak. My tears fell, not because I still loved Terrence, but for myself, for all the foolish years I had wasted. The next morning, I woke up early and called Attorney Sterling. My voice was firm. "Please, help me finalize the divorce proceedings as quickly as possible. I don't want to drag this out for another day." Attorney Sterling was silent for a moment, then replied, "Rest assured, Maya, with all this evidence, the divorce and the division of assets will be very straightforward. You will not be responsible for any of his debts." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. What I needed right now wasn't a victory on paper, but a clear line drawn so I could step out of Terrence's life. That afternoon, Andre came to my house. He stood at the gate for a long time before ringing the bell. When I opened the door, he kept his head down. "Maya, I'm sorry. I had no idea Terrence was like that. If I had known—" I looked at him with a mix of sadness and pity. "I don't blame you, Andre. You did nothing wrong. He did." Andre hesitated. "Mom, She was at the hospital all night crying. She regrets pressuring you so many times. This morning, she asked me to come and apologize to you on her behalf." I was quiet for a moment, thinking of Miss Gladys's tormented face yesterday. I couldn't bring myself to resent her completely. She wasn't evil. She was just blinded by her love for her son. "Go back and tell your mother I'm not angry. But what's between Terrence and me can't be changed." Andre wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "I just hope you can find peace after this." "Yes," I said, "I hope so too." After that day, I never went back to the hospital. I delegated all legal matters to my lawyer. I didn't want to see Terrence again, didn't want to hear another excuse from that man. Everything I needed to understand, I already understood. A week later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Miss Gladys. "Maya, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I only trusted my son and made you suffer. Now I understand that you were the one who was hurt the most." Her voice trembled, punctuated by labored breaths. I was silent for a long time before I replied, "Miss Gladys, I don't blame you, but I can't come back. I'm too tired." On the other end of the line, her voice broke, and then there was only the sound of soft crying. I hung up, my heart heavy as stone. Some pain comes not from hatred, but from the fact that there is no way back. On the day of the court hearing, Terrence was brought in. He was much thinner than before, his face stripped of its former arrogance. When he saw me, a faint glimmer of hope flickered in his eyes. "Maya, I know I was wrong. Please tell the judge to give me a chance." I didn't look at him. I looked straight at the judge and read my statement in a calm voice. Every word was like a clean cut, severing what little was left between me and Terrence. The divorce was granted quickly. We were officially no longer husband and wife. I was not responsible for any of his debts. The house was still mine. The rest of Terrence's life no longer had anything to do with me. Stepping out of the courthouse, I took a deep breath. The sky that day was incredibly blue, so blue that I found myself smiling. It turned out the sky had always been there. It was just that for all those years, I had forgotten to look up. A month later, I moved. Not because I was afraid of the memories, but because I wanted to start over in a new place. I requested a transfer to a new branch at my firm. The busy work kept me from dwelling on the past. One afternoon after work, I ran into Jasmine in front of a supermarket. She was much thinner, her face bare of its usual makeup. Seeing me, she froze as if she'd been turned to stone. "Maya?" I nodded, not entirely surprised. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I was truly wrong." I looked at her, my heart free of hatred. What I had been through had pushed me beyond the limits of blame. "You're still young. You made a mistake. You paid the price. Consider it a lesson. Don't make the same mistake again." Jasmine burst into tears, nodding repeatedly. I walked away without looking back. To me, Jasmine had become a part of the past, nothing more. That night, I sat alone on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping hot tea and watching the traffic thin out on the street below. A light breeze blew, and my heart was surprisingly calm. There was no more wrenching pain, no resentment, no self-torment, just a light emptiness, like the sky after a storm with only a few thin clouds remaining. I knew I wasn't fully healed, but I also knew I was on the right path. Life is harsh, but it is also fair. It took a husband from me, but it gave me back myself, a person far more clear-eyed and resilient than before. After the chance encounter with Jasmine, I thought my heart was calm enough to be undisturbed by any ripples from the past, but life rarely lets a person off that easily. One Monday morning, as I arrived at the office, the receptionist told me someone was there to see me, a relative of my ex-husband. I paused, a faint, uneasy feeling flickering through me. Standing in front of my office door was my former mother-in-law. She was much thinner than the last time I'd seen her. Her hair was almost completely white. Her back was stooped, and the lines around her tired eyes had deepened. Seeing me, she looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't. After a long moment, she finally spoke. "Maya, can I talk to you for a minute?" I was silent for a few seconds, then nodded. I no longer resented her, but I also didn't feel close enough to call her mom anymore. We sat at a small cafe near my office. She clutched a faded cloth bag in her hands, her voice trembling. "Terrence? He's about to be transferred to another facility for further investigation into his debts. They said his sentence might be extended." I stared at the old wooden table, saying nothing. "These past few days, he's been begging to see you. He says he just needs to talk to you one more time before he's moved. Maya, I know I have no right to ask this of you, but I'm his mother. I can't bear it." She bowed her head very low. I heard in her voice not the coercion of before, but the bitter helplessness of a mother watching her son fall without being able to catch him. "The doctor said he's suffering from exhaustion and his mental state is unstable. I'm just afraid he might do something desperate." Hearing that, my heart tightened. No matter how much Terrence had hurt me, I didn't want him to choose that path. After a long silence, I finally said slowly, "I will go see him once, but only once." Miss Gladys's eyes lit up as if she had just been saved. She clasped her hands in front of her chest. "Thank you, Maya. I am truly grateful." 2 days later, I went to the detention center. The iron gate clanged shut behind me, a cold, heavy sound. In the small, cramped visiting room, I sat across from Terrence, separated by a thick pane of glass. He was gaunt, his eyes sunken. When he saw me, he looked as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "Maya, you actually came." I nodded slightly, my voice even. "You said you wanted to see me, so I'm here. If you have something to say it quickly." Terrence lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. After a moment he looked up, his eyes red. "I know I have nothing left to say to defend myself. I just want to say one thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for ruining your life." I looked deep into his eyes, feeling no anger, no bitterness, just a quiet exhaustion. Does saying sorry now change anything? Terrence shook his head, a tear rolling down his cheek. "No, it doesn't change anything. But if I don't say it, I'm afraid I won't be able to get through the years ahead." I was silent for a long time. In that moment, I realized the man sitting in front of me was no longer the Terrence I had once loved, nor was he the deceitful man from the video. He was just a defeated man, stripped bare before the consequences of his own actions. "Maya, if I could go back, I would rather have never met you than have met you and hurt you like this." I smiled faintly, a sad, belated acceptance. If we had never met, maybe I wouldn't have learned what it means to trust the wrong person, or what it means to stand up after being broken. You taught me a very expensive lesson, but I've paid my dues. The rest is for you to carry. Terrence stared at me, as if trying to burn my image into his memory for this final meeting. "Maya, will you be okay?" "I will be," I answered succinctly. I stood up, placed my hand on the glass, and said my last words. "Let's end it here, Terrence. I don't hate you anymore, but I can't go back. Don't hold on any longer." He placed his hand on his side of the glass, our palms meeting across an unbridgeable distance. I turned and walked away, my heart feeling incredibly light. Stepping out of the detention center gates, the afternoon sun felt strangely warm on my face. I knew I had just closed a chapter of my life for good. In the time that followed, life was quiet. My career was stable. I was promoted to a new position. More pressure, but also more rewarding. Andre still called occasionally to check in. He told me his mother's health was declining. I asked him to take care of her on my behalf, but I didn't have the courage to revisit that past again myself. One evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "Maya, it's Jasmine. I just signed a job contract in another state. Before I leave, I just wanted to say thank you for not pushing me to the brink." I looked at the message for a long time, then replied simply, "Live an honest life, Jasmine. That's enough." I put my phone down, feeling a sense of peace. Everyone has to walk the path they choose. I was no longer responsible for carrying anyone else's burden. That night, I stood at the window of my apartment, watching the city lights come on. The lights from thousands of small windows reflected against the dark sky like man-made stars. I suddenly realized that no matter how dark life gets, there is always light, as long as you're willing to open your eyes and see it. I had once lived in the shadow of someone else's mistakes, but from now on, I would live in the light of my own choices. After seeing Terrence in the detention center, it felt like a heavy door in my heart had finally closed. The sleepless nights grew fewer, and the dull ache in my chest lessened. I started getting used to the new rhythm of life as a single woman, free, but also solitary. Work during the day, home at night, occasional coffee with colleagues on weekends. Life passed without drama or tragedy, but also without the rose-tinted illusions of the past. One rainy afternoon, just as I was leaving work, Andre called. His voice was choked with emotion. "Maya, Mom, she's very weak. The doctor says it's only a matter of days. She keeps asking for you. Could you come for a little while?" I held the phone for a long time without answering. The rain was coming down hard outside, each drop hitting the office window with a sharp tap. I had told myself so many times that I wouldn't go back, but standing on the line between reason and humanity, I was still the one with a soft heart. "Send me the address. I'll be there." The old hospital still had that familiar smell of antiseptic. When I walked into the room, my former mother-in-law lay motionless on the bed, her face gaunt, her eyes sunken, her breath as faint as a fragile thread. Andre sat by her bed, holding her hand. He jumped up when he saw me. "Maya." I nodded and walked closer. Miss Gladys struggled to open her eyes. When she saw me, a faint light flickered in her gaze. "Maya, you came." I leaned down and took her frail hand. The same hand that had so often pointed at me in accusation now felt like just cold, trembling bones. "Yes, I'm here." Tears welled in her eyes and streamed down her temples. I wronged you so much, Maya. My whole life I only saw my son. I didn't see his true nature, and I let you suffer." I squeezed her hand gently, my voice slow. "It's in the past. I don't blame you anymore." She began to cry audibly, her chest heaving weakly. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope if there's a next life, that I don't get to be your mother-in-law, so that I can be a stranger and treat you with the kindness you deserve." Those words felt like a gentle knife slicing through my heart. I bowed my head, my own tears falling onto her dry, wrinkled hand. "In this life, our debt to each other is paid. You can rest now." She nodded faintly, her breathing slowing until the line on the heart monitor stretched into a long, flat tone. Andre broke down in sobs. But I just stood there silently, my heart empty. It wasn't the pain of losing my own parents, just a deep, weary sadness, like closing the final chapter of a relationship that had reached its absolute end. The funeral was simple. I was there for the whole thing, fulfilling my final duty as a daughter-in-law. Relatives looked at me with a mixture of curiosity, pity, and unease. I didn't care. I was just doing what my conscience told me was right. Terrence was not allowed to attend. I heard he had requested leave from the facility but was denied. I looked at his mother's portrait and wondered how much pain she was in at the end, knowing her son was lost, but it was all too late. After the service, Andre walked me to my car. He bowed his head low. "Maya, I don't think I can ever repay your kindness." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just live a good life, Andre. That's enough. Don't let your mother worry about you from the other side." He nodded, his eyes red. Returning to my small apartment, I locked the door and leaned against it. For the first time in a very long time, I cried out loud. Not for Terrence, not for his mother, but for a painful chapter of my life that had officially ended. I cried as if to say goodbye to the person I used to be, the blind, submissive woman who lived for others until she forgot herself. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work as a way of saving myself. I was put in charge of a large project that required constant travel. The busy pace left me little time to think. I realized I was much stronger than I had ever imagined. On a work trip to Philadelphia, during a dinner with business partners, I met Elias Thorne, their lead engineer. He was reserved, with a calm gaze. He wasn't overly friendly or curious about my personal life. Our conversation was just about work, life, and family. And when he walked me to my car, he smiled. "It was really nice talking with you tonight, Maya. If you don't mind, I'd like to take you out for coffee the next time you're in town." I was a little surprised, but I nodded. "Okay." On the way back to my hotel, I realized my heart wasn't as tightly sealed as before. I was no longer terrified of meeting a new man, nor did I feel pressure to either pursue or avoid a relationship. I was simply letting things happen as they would. That night, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at me no longer had that old, sad look. Instead, her gaze was calm, experienced, and self-possessed. I found myself smiling, a smile I hadn't seen on my own face in years. My life had lost so much: a marriage, a home, a sense of trust. But I had also gotten myself back, a person no longer living in fear and dependency, and I knew that ahead of me a new path was quietly opening up. It wasn't loud or colorful, but it held hope. After that business trip, Elias and I stayed in touch. It wasn't a whirlwind of messages, just occasional texts checking in on work. Sometimes he'd send me a picture of a construction site in progress. Other times, I'd send him a newly completed audit summary. It was gentle, like a small stream trickling through rocks. Not loud, but enough to let you know you were no longer standing alone in an empty space. One weekend afternoon, Elias texted me. "Are you busy? I'm near your neighborhood. Could I buy you a coffee?" I looked out at my balcony. The sky was clear, the breeze was light. It was a rare afternoon when I wasn't buried in paperwork. I replied, "I'll be right down." The small coffee shop was tucked away on a tree-lined street. Elias was already there. When he saw me walk in, he stood up and pulled out my chair. He was the same as always, calm, polite, without a single wasted gesture. We talked about work at first, then gradually drifted to other lighter topics. Elias asked very gently, "Have you been living alone for long?" I stared into my coffee cup for a moment before answering, "I got divorced a little over a year ago." Elias just nodded, not pressing for details. A moment later, he said simply, "I've been through a loss myself. I married young. My wife passed away in a car accident 4 years ago. Since then, it's mostly been just me and my work." For the first time, I saw a deep sadness in his eyes. But it wasn't tragic. It was quiet, like the surface of a still lake. I suddenly understood why he wasn't in a hurry about anything. We didn't speak of it again, as if we had a silent understanding that some pains don't need to be aired out with too many words. After that day, Elias started visiting me occasionally. Sometimes he'd bring a bag of fruit, other times just a cup of hot cocoa in the evening. He never overstepped, never demanded anything. He arrived at a reasonable time and left at a reasonable time. That respect for boundaries made me feel safe. One day, Andre called me with news that made me freeze. "Terrence, he had a stroke in the facility. He's in the ICU right now." I went silent, the old memories stirring like a thin layer of dust blown into the air. You don't have to go," Andre added quickly. "I just wanted to let you know." I stood by the window for a long time, watching the people below. Part of me wanted to turn away, but another part remembered the years I had called that man my husband. Finally, I sighed. "What's the hospital address? I'll stop by for a bit." This time, I wasn't going as a wife or a relative. I was going as an old acquaintance, visiting a piece of my past. Terrence lay on the hospital bed, his body rail-thin, one side of his face drooping from the stroke. When he saw me, his eyes widened and his lips trembled, but he couldn't form any words. Andre stood beside him, his voice choked. "The doctor said he's past the critical stage, but he'll likely have paralysis on one side." I looked at Terence, my heart not aching as I thought it would. All I felt was a faint, distant pity, like seeing a stranger suffering the consequences of his own choices. I walked closer, looked directly into his eyes, and spoke slowly, just loud enough for him to hear. "Terence, can you hear me? Live the rest of your life as best you can. The past between us. I'm not angry anymore, but we can't go back. Don't hold on." A single tear escaped from the corner of his paralyzed eye. I couldn't tell if it was genuine remorse or just fear of the disabled road ahead. I no longer cared to distinguish between the two. Leaving the hospital, I felt a strange sensation, not complete relief, but not heavy either. It was like setting down something I had been carrying on my shoulder for too long. My hands were finally free. That evening, Elias was waiting for me at the entrance of my building. He looked at me intently. "Are you tired?" I nodded slightly, not saying much. He just opened the car door for me, turned on the heater, and drove in silence. That silence didn't feel lonely. On the contrary, it felt safe. When the car stopped in front of my building, he said, "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." I turned to look at him. The streetlight cast a gentle, steady glow on his face. For the first time in many years, my heart fluttered, not from pain, but from a warm, tentative, yet genuine feeling. "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded, not pushing me to say more. In the following days, I was busy rearranging my life. I had my former mother-in-law's ashes moved back to her hometown in Georgia, as Andre had wished. I lit incense for her one last time, standing before her new grave for a long time. I no longer called her Mom in my heart, but I bowed my head as someone who had once been family. On the way back, I texted Elias. "I'm doing better now." He replied instantly, "That's good to hear. When you're free, let me take you to dinner." I looked at the message and smiled, a very different smile, no longer timid. I knew I was strong enough to take another step forward, not to forget the past, but to keep the past from holding me back. After Elias's dinner invitation, I didn't reply right away, not because I was hesitant, but because I wanted to ask myself one clear question. What am I still afraid of? I had been afraid of loving, of trusting, of even starting over. But I now understood that if I kept my heart locked up out of fear, I would spend my whole life on the defensive. I texted him back, "I'm free this weekend." Elias replied with a single word, "Okay." But that one word was enough to make my heart feel warm. That weekend, we met at a small restaurant by the river. It wasn't fancy, just a few wooden tables under strings of yellow lights with a cool breeze blowing in from the water. Elias arrived early, as always. He stood up when he saw me, his eyes not hiding his pleasure. "Was the traffic bad?" I shook my head. "No, the ride was quick." We ordered simple dishes and talked. Not about work, not about the past, just about everyday things. The food from his hometown, a childhood memory of mine, whether we preferred coffee or tea in the morning. I suddenly realized it had been a very long time since I'd been able to talk to a man without feeling tense or guarded. After dinner, Elias took me for a walk along the riverbank. The wind blew through my hair. He walked beside me, keeping a comfortable distance. After a while, he spoke slowly. "Maya, I know you've been through a lot. I don't want to pressure you, but I want to be clear. I care for you as a man, for a woman." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my voice steady. "Thank you for being direct. And I want to be honest, too. I'm not ready to jump into a new relationship so quickly." Elias nodded, not a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "I don't need an answer right now. I just want you to know that I'm here and I can be patient." I looked at him, a strange feeling rising inside me. It wasn't an explosion of emotion, but a rare kind of peace, the peace that comes from being respected. That night at home, I sat by the window for a long time. I thought about Terence, about my old marriage, about the past hurts. It was strange. Once my heart was calm enough, I could think of his name without a sharp pang of pain. He was just a part of a life that was over, a chapter that wasn't beautiful, but had to exist to lead me to where I was today. A few days later, Andre called again. This time his voice was more tired. "Maya, Terrence is getting weaker. He has almost no movement on one side. The doctors say any recovery will be very limited." I listened silently. "I'm just calling to let you know," he said. "I don't dare ask you to come anymore." I looked out at the light rain falling outside and said slowly, "Thanks for letting me know. If you need any help that's within my means, just ask." Andre's voice choked up. "You're still so good to our family. We owe you so much." After the call, I let out a soft sigh. I no longer held any resentment for that family. All the debts, rights, and wrongs and losses had been paid in full over the past few years. I had kept only one thing for myself, the refusal to let my heart become bitter. Another evening, Elias took me to see a plot of land on the outskirts of the city where his company was planning a new project. I went along just to offer my professional opinion for the bid, but during that trip I saw more of who he was. Elias was serious about his work, spoke respectfully to his partners, and was never boastful or hot-tempered. When I asked for his expert opinion, he listened carefully, never interrupting or imposing his own views. On the way back, as the car moved slowly down a tree-lined road, Elias suddenly asked, "Maya, if you were ready one day, would you give me a chance?" I turned to look at him. His eyes were not pushy or demanding, just filled with a patient, dignified hope. I didn't answer right away. "I need time," I said, "and maybe a little courage. I can't promise anything, but I won't close myself off anymore." Elias smiled. "That's enough for me." In the days that followed, Elias and I saw each other more often, but we still maintained a comfortable distance. I began to realize that I was changing too. I was no longer afraid when I thought of the word future. I no longer assumed that happiness was a fragile thing destined to break. I was learning to live slowly, to appreciate the small moments, and most importantly, I was learning to trust again, cautiously, but not with a closed heart. One afternoon, I went to visit my parents' graves. Standing before the two simple headstones, I lit incense and bowed my head for a long time. I whispered as if to myself, "Mom, Dad, I made it through. I'm not that weak little girl anymore." The wind blew softly through the grass. I felt as if somewhere my parents were smiling. That evening, Elias picked me up from my hometown. I felt a strange warmth in my heart. Between a woman like me who was so familiar with betrayal and a man like him who had known great loss, we weren't rushing into anything. We were walking side by side, slowly, carefully, but sincerely. I knew the road ahead was still long, and I couldn't predict the future. But 10 years from now, if I were to look back on this period of my life, I believe I wouldn't regret giving myself a chance to live differently. Time passed slowly, like a quiet river. Elias and I didn't call each other boyfriend and girlfriend, nor did we rush to define our relationship. We were simply present in each other's lives, just enough not to lose one another, and just enough not to feel suffocated. I found a new kind of peace, not because I had someone by my side, but because I myself was no longer trembling at the thought of change. One early winter morning, Andre called. This time, his voice was different, heavy. "Maya, Terrence, he didn't make it." I stood silently by the window, my hand gripping the phone. Outside, yellow leaves were falling in the wind. I knew this day would come sooner or later. But hearing the news still made my heart skip a beat. "When did it happen?" "Early this morning. The stroke got worse. There was no time." I didn't cry. I just felt a stillness inside me, like standing before a grave that had long been prepared in my mind. Will you come see him one last time?" Andre asked, his voice hesitant, not daring to push. I was silent for a few seconds, then said, "I'll come." Not as an ex-wife, but as someone who had shared a part of his life's journey. Terrence's funeral wasn't large, just his father's side of the family and a few old acquaintances. When I walked in, Andre's eyes turned red. He gripped my hand tightly, his own hand trembling. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. In the cold funeral home, Terence lay in his casket, his face peaceful. I stood for a long time looking at him. There was no more blame, no more pity, just a vague sense of regret for a life that went down the wrong path and couldn't find its way back. His mother was gone, so there was no one to cry for him a final time. Andre handled everything. Watching him dressed in mourning clothes, I felt a surge of compassion. Life had taken so much from him in just a few short years. His mother, his brother, the family he once had. As I lit a stick of incense before Terence's casket, I whispered in my heart, "From now on, all debts between us are settled." The smoke rose and dissipated into the air. I turned and walked away, my steps no longer heavy. Outside, Elias was waiting for me. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a tissue when he saw my eyes were red. His silent presence was a comfort. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I'm okay," I replied. "It's just closing one more door." He nodded, saying nothing more, and simply walked beside me all the way home. After Terence's funeral, everything truly came to a close. Andre moved back to his hometown to look after the family graves. He texted me, "I guess it's time for me to live my own life now, Maya." I read his message with a mix of sadness and relief. Sometime later, Elias took me to meet his mother. She was a gentlewoman with silver-streaked hair who spoke slowly. I was nervous like a young girl, even though my heart had been broken once before. She looked at me carefully and then smiled. "You must be Maya. Elias talks about you a lot." I bowed my head respectfully. During dinner, no one asked too much about my past. The conversation was simple and about everyday things. The kindness, free of curiosity, put me at ease. As I was leaving, Elias's mother took my hand. "You've been through a lot. From now on, just think of this as your home." A single sentence, and it made my eyes sting. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to me with such simple, unconditional kindness. On the way home, Elias asked, "Did you feel pressured?" I shook my head. "No, you and your mother made me feel very safe." Elias smiled, his eyes softening. "I just want you to feel at peace when you're with me." That night, back home, I looked in the mirror for a long time. The woman staring back was different. She was no longer suspicious or overly defensive, just carefully optimistic. A week later, Elias gave me a small box. He didn't kneel or use flowery words. He just looked at me and said slowly, "Maya, I can't promise you a perfect life, but I promise I will never deceive you. I will never abandon you, and I will be with you when you need me. If you are ever ready to take another step, I want to be the one to take it with you." Inside the box was a simple ring, a delicate silver band. I held it in my hand, feeling a strange sense of steady, quiet trust. I didn't answer right away. I gently closed the box and looked at Elias. "Give me a little more time, not because I don't trust you, but because I want to be completely ready when I step forward." Elias nodded, not at all disappointed. "I can wait." I left with the small box in my purse. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the path I had traveled, from a wife waiting by a hospital bed to a woman standing before a new chance at happiness. That path was filled with wreckage. But because of it, I knew I was no longer the naive girl I once was. I didn't know what the future held. But this time, I wasn't walking into it blindly. I was walking with clarity, with healed scars, and with just enough hope. I kept that small box in my drawer for days, never opening it, but never returning it to Elias either. It wasn't because I doubted my feelings for him, but because a deep-seated fear remained. The fear of misplacing my trust again, of watching happiness crumble into dust. One evening, I made up my mind. I texted Elias, "I'm free tomorrow. If you have time, let's meet." He replied almost instantly, "Okay, I'll pick you up." We didn't go to a restaurant or a coffee shop. Elias drove me to the countryside, to a small dirt road that ran alongside a freshly harvested field. The late afternoon sky was clear, the air was cool, and the scent of dry straw hung in the air. He stopped the car. "I thought you might like it here." I got out, and a sense of calm washed over me. We walked slowly along the path. After a while, I spoke. "Elias, have you ever regretted waiting for someone for so long?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Sometimes when I was lonely, I wondered. But then I thought, if you rush into holding the wrong hand just to avoid being alone, the price is even higher. I'd rather wait for the right thing than rush into the wrong one." His words touched the softest part of my heart. I stopped and looked at him directly. "I don't want to enter a relationship because I'm afraid of being lonely. I only want to enter one when I truly feel safe." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I know, and I respect that." I took a deep breath, my hand unconsciously touching the purse where I had brought the small box. After a long moment, I took it out and placed it in his hand. "Elias, I can't say yes right now, but I want to thank you for coming into my life with such kindness. I don't want to make you wait indefinitely." Elias opened the box, looked at the ring, and then looked at me. He wasn't sad or disappointed. He just smiled gently. "I still want to wait if you'll let me. Not with this ring, but with my presence in your life." At that moment, I realized I was no longer afraid of the word wait, because this time the person waiting wasn't demanding, and the person being waited for wasn't being forced. "Okay," I said softly. "Let's just keep walking together like this. No rush." Elias nodded, a rare, bright smile spreading across his face. The months that followed were a time of quiet stability. I slowly realized that a mature love wasn't a violent storm, but a quiet, steady stream. One evening, while Elias and I were at his house looking over some blueprints, his mother brought out 2 cups of hot tea. She smiled at me. "Maya, I just want you to know one thing. You are always welcome in this house, no matter who you are or where you've been." I bowed my head, my lips trembling. It was the greatest acceptance I could have asked for. That night, when I got home, I opened the drawer and took out the small box. The ring lay quietly inside. I suddenly understood that some promises don't need to be spoken aloud. They just need to be held patiently in the heart. I hadn't put on the ring yet, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the day I might. Spring arrived slowly that year. I stood by my apartment window, watching the city below, and realized it had been a very long time since I had felt so peaceful. The nightmares had stopped. The random stabs of pain were gone. That afternoon, Elias drove me to Andre's new town. His small repair shop was on a dusty country road. Andre was leaner, his skin tanned by the sun, but his eyes were brighter than ever. "Maya! Elias! Come on in!" He smiled, the genuine smile of a man who had put his life back together on his own terms. That night, as Elias drove me home, I opened my purse and took out the small box. My hand was steady, my heart beating slowly but clearly. "Open it," I said. He did. The silver ring lay quietly in his palm. I spoke slowly, each word carefully considered. "I can't promise we'll never argue or be sad. I can't promise I'll be a perfect wife. But I know one thing. If I don't step forward today, I might spend the rest of my life standing behind my fear, and I don't want that anymore." Elias looked at me for a long time, his eyes welling up. He didn't say a word, just gently took the ring and slid it onto my finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me. "Marry me in your own way, Maya," he whispered. "Let time answer for everything else." I nodded. I didn't cry. I just felt a quiet warmth spreading through my chest. Our wedding was small. Andre was there. As I stood in my simple white dress, I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who collapsed in a hospital, who endured a marriage full of lies. I finally understood that the path to peace isn't about forgetting everything, but about daring to look your wounds in the eye and then walking forward without trembling. After the wedding, Elias and I moved into a small house he owned. It wasn't grand, but every evening a warm yellow light shone from the windows. There was the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. There was someone waiting for me to come home, and that was more than enough. Sometimes I still dreamed of Terence, but he passed by like a stranger. There were no more debts between us. I would wake up feeling only peace. One morning, as I was drinking tea on the porch, Elias put a hand on my shoulder. "Maya," he said softly, "I've never asked about your past, but I want to tell you one thing. I'm grateful that you were strong enough to get here." I took his hand. "And I'm grateful that you waited." We looked at each other. No more words needed. Life has losses that can never be replaced. I lost a marriage. I lost trust. I lost years of my youth to anguish. But in return, I learned to stand tall. I learned the value of kindness, of trusting the right person at the right time. If I hadn't seen that security footage, if I hadn't dared to face the truth, I might still be living in a beautiful lie today. And if I hadn't been brave enough to let go of the past, I would never have found this peaceful present. In the end, I understood something very simple. Happiness isn't about never being broken. Happiness is having the courage to trust, to live, and to love again after you've been shattered, with a heart that knows pain but no longer holds on to resentment. The story of Maya is a long journey of tears, betrayal, collapse, and rebirth. From a wife living in blind faith, she paid a price in youth, dignity, and profound pain. But it was from that darkness that she learned to stand up, rediscovering the value of clarity, honor, and self-respect. This story is a reminder that while blind endurance may feel like noble sacrifice, it often only prolongs tragedy. When respect and honesty are gone, patience only deepens the wounds. The greatest lesson from Maya's story is not revenge or resentment, but the courage to face the truth, to choose again, and to take responsibility for one's own life. In life, you sometimes have to accept loss, to hold on to what is more important, your own worth. Money can be earned again, love can be rebuilt, but once self-respect is lost, it is incredibly hard to find. Don't cling to a toxic relationship for fear of being alone. Don't torture yourself to please others. Maya found happiness not because she was lucky, but because she deserved it. She deserved a peaceful life after all she had endured. Her new happiness came not as compensation, but as a result of her growth. If you find yourself in a situation like Maya's, remember that you have the right to choose your own life, no matter how late it may seem. Sometimes letting go is not a loss, but the beginning of a new you.